I think there has to be a lot of mutual respect among the various groups that are involved. I would actually start with communities themselves, with community-based organizations and the problems that communities are tackling on their own, and work up from there. Certainly national governments have a big role to play because they can aggregate resources importantly. And then the science and engineering community, both nationally and internationally, need to lend their expertise in a way that's really in a partnership with local communities and local situations, because it just won't, this won't work top down. It really has to be a partnership with hands stretched out in both directions. I think there are different approaches that are needed in different contexts. You have different levels of education in the general population. You have different economic conditions. You have different strengths in industries and in agriculture. Some countries are suffering from conflict, from armed conflict, or from large flows of migration in, and so there are a lot of differences in how the toolkit would be applied in different places. There are also some common approaches and common concepts in getting science and technology to work for development, like using it for regional development, trying to draw in groups that are disadvantaged. And those things can be tried with the local variations that are needed in a lot of different countries. Scientists and engineers have important roles to play, and in my experience, younger scientists and engineers in the affluent countries are particularly interested in doing this because they know that they have a stake in that world of shared prosperity. They want to choose topics to study that are going to contribute to the SDGs. They want to get out of their affluent countries and actually work with partners in the places where it's hardest to achieve the SDGs. I think what people really need, what organizations need, is a sense of humility about this task, that we all have things to learn from each other, that organizations on the ground are really important, and having this process happen bottom up, it's just not going to happen top down. So funding bodies need to give some priority to these topics and create those opportunities for people-to-people contact between scientists and engineers. Developing entrepreneurial skills in a lot of different places in the world is really important too. That's an important part of the innovation process. So having people locally in a lot of parts of the world who can respond to opportunities that come up in the global business environment is very important. Definitely the contexts make a big difference. It's partly a difference in the resources that are available in the public sphere to support the kind of activities that we're talking about. It's partly differences in the strength of the private sector and what the private sector is involved in. And then those scientists and engineers are in very, very different contexts in different countries where there are very few of them, and there's a lot of local political expectation that they will contribute to solving local problems while they're trying to get themselves established internationally so that they can bring knowledge in from the rest of the world. So very, very different contexts. Some countries are facing civil war. Some countries are facing big migration flows across their borders. There's a lot of different challenges for the development process and the SDGs to be achieved in different countries. They're very, very different infrastructure in place and different capabilities. So no, I don't think it's going to be the same kind of effort in different places. First of all, my own country, the USA, is not particularly active in the SDG space, and I think that the US and other affluent countries do need to be more engaged, putting bigger investments in, because we actually have the resources that we can invest in shared prosperity, that we're investing in other things right at the moment. I also believe that the private sector, that corporations, both big corporations and small corporations, need to be more engaged in this, and they are really starting to see that it's in their best interest to have a world in which no one is left behind. So I think a cooperative effort from big corporations, from the international corporations, is really important as well. And they're not doing as much as they might at this point. I think they have heard the message that inequality is growing and that they're part of the reason that inequality is growing. And so for their own business stability, I believe that corporations are actually starting to see that they need to spread prosperity so that they can stay alive. So I think that's the best incentive that they have, is their own survival and prosperity as well. If the business leaders in the U.S. get on board with this idea, then the government will hear the message as well. That will kind of trickle out into general leadership. There's a lot that the U.S. needs to change to be a positive rather than a negative force in this effort, but we're capable of doing it as people of the U.S., and we'll see whether the leadership comes along.